Welcome to this special meeting of the Santa Barbara City Council. It's Wednesday, May 26, 2021. It's a budget hearing for our Public Works Department, and we'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you call the roll, Ms. Gorman?
Yes. Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez and Ms. Gutierrez, there you go.
Here.
Councilmember Harmon?
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Here.
Councilmember Friedman?
Here.
Councilmember Jordan?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez?
Present.
And Mayor Murillo.
Here. Would you read the item into the record? Thanks.
Certainly. Item 1, fiscal year 2022 recommended operating and capital budget.
Great. And again, we're focusing on Public Works and the General Fund Measure C capital program. We'll have our presentation, take City Council questions, and then we'll go to public comment. So, and Mr. Hagmark, it's there's quite a bit here, right? Public Works, big department. So I would ask the council members keep notes, and then if we find a midway point to break in and ask questions, we can do that. But for now, welcome, and we're really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Mayor Murillo, members of City Council, Joshua Hagmark, Acting Public Works Director. And yeah, you guys are superheroes after a late night meeting, Super Flower Blood Moon, I think it was called, and hitting it hard again this morning. We're excited here today to have the opportunity to share with you all the great things that are going on in Public Works and what we are budgeting to do in fiscal year 22. Having had an opportunity to step into this role in the last 5 months, I'm reminded just how special Public Works is and what an honor it has been working with the largest and most diverse department in the city. Next slide. Let me take a few minutes to walk you through the general plan for our presentation and discussion. We will be following this roadmap before you as we work through the 7 divisions of Public Works. Each section will cover key initiatives and work efforts, pandemic response and recovery, the proposed budget, personnel changes, if any, and proposed fee and rate changes. It's a big department with a lot of funds. There are intimidating 150 slides to get through today, and we estimate it will take about 90 minutes of staff presentations. However, we have structured this presentation such that each speaker will only be presenting no more than 15 minutes before we pause for your questions. Following the Public Works budget presentation, we will have a 15-minute presentation on the General Fund and Measure C Capital Fund. Much of that work has been presented to you by other departments, so we will move through that material quickly and make ourselves available for any questions. So let's start with the department overview. Next slide. As you can see from the department, it's comprised of 7 divisions, including administration. Administration being the center of the hub that keeps Public Works working. During our presentation today, we will go into detail about each of the key divisions: fleet services, streets operations and infrastructure, water resources, engineering, facilities, and transportation planning and parking. Next slide. Being one of the most diverse departments in the city, we work hard at building a positive and supportive culture. One of our guiding documents is our mission statement, which was jointly developed from input from throughout the department. We provide our community with a sustainable foundation to thrive by delivering quality services and public infrastructure through efficient and fiscally responsible practices. Public infrastructure is the foundation of our community, and we take pride and ownership in the critical role as we recognize that our service is what allows the rest of the community to go about living and pursuing their dreams. Next slide. This year has been nothing short of challenging for all city departments, but nowhere is it more true than in Public Works. As noted in our mission, we provide the foundation for this community to thrive. In Public Works fashion, we took the pandemic as a challenge to rethinking the services we provide or how we provide them. The pandemic has been a catalyst for making bold changes in how we work and engage with our community. During our presentation today, we're going to touch on how we have capitalized on the pandemic, adapting and eventually thriving, and we'll be emerging from the pandemic an organization that still provides high quality services, but can do so with more efficiency and with better engagement with our community. Next slide. Public Works is comprised of 301 women and men with operations that span 24/7. Public Works does not sleep. Public Works Department in many ways is a small city in itself. This year's budget includes the addition of 1 FTE. Next slide. Total department revenues for fiscal year 2022 are projected to be 139 million, with water being the largest fund at 66.8 million, followed by wastewater. General fund is one of the smallest at just under 9 million. Next slide. This is a breakdown of the total department expenditures. You will note water and wastewater make up the majority of the cost, followed by department share of Measure C capital at 19.2 million, which goes to street maintenance. This year's budget does not have any general funds going to capital in FY22. Next slide. This chart provides an overview of Public Works budget by category. Unlike other city departments that are 80 to 90% salary and benefits, Public Works salary and benefits are 29% of the department's budget. A large portion of Public Works budget includes capital budget at 47 million. Some might be asking what water purchases refers to, which is budgeted at 9.2 million. This item includes the cost associated with the city's participation in joint water agencies, which council members Sneddon and Friedman are representatives in. This includes the Central Coast Water Authority, the Kachuma Conservation Release Board, and the Kachuma Operation and Maintenance Board. Each division will discuss the budget changes in their respective divisions, but there are some common themes that you will notice through several areas of the presentation. I'm going to touch on them here so that we can kind of move through the presentation a little quicker. One is the increases to salary and benefits. You'll see that consistently through the various programs. It's roughly about 5% as it shows up in the various budgets. And then there are fee changes that are proposed, and I believe you'll be talking about those in June, to water, wastewater, and land development fees at around 3% roughly. So for that point, I'll just make that point here so that we don't have to touch on that over and over again. So at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Pease, the Public Works Business Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark. Good morning, Mayor Murillo, council members. I am Michael Pease, Public Works Business Manager. I'm excited to present the Administration Division budget today. Next slide, please. The Administration Division is proud to support the department in 2 key areas: financial support and administrative support. Financial support is provided by analysts serving key areas of the department, and the department's administrative support team is led by the administrative supervisor. Next slide, please. The administration program is $1.1 million with 6 FTEs. During the pandemic, administration supported Public Works by facilitating technology changes to provide virtual meetings and more online resources. It also spearheaded capture and recovery of pandemic response costs for the department, continued to coordinate department-wide and citywide efforts, including the department budget activities, the citywide capital improvement program, community outreach, timely response to public records requests, and the department's council agenda report process. Next slide, please. As a general fund program, administration plans to continue reduced service levels in response to the budget impacts of the pandemic, primarily shifting community outreach efforts from contract to city staff and reducing a variety of supplies and services and equipment costs, such as small contracts, training, supplies, meeting and travel, and deferring small equipment replacement purchases. Such equipment replacement deferrals are anticipated to increase short-term maintenance costs. However, staff will continue to mitigate these impacts as much as possible. Next slide, please. Administration is funded by internal charges, primarily overhead charges to enterprise funds and general fund general tax revenue. Revenue increases result from the city's updated cost allocation plan coordinated by finance, Expenditure variances are primarily due to updated salary and benefit projections and allocated costs as coordinated by finance. The largest increase is primarily the result of increases to citywide retirement costs. General fund budget reductions were also updated in coordination with finance, including changes to one-time reductions this year. Next slide, please. That concludes the administration division budget. We're small but mighty, and I'm happy to answer any questions before continuing to the engineering division.
I think we're just going to move forward, Mr. Pease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our city engineer, Brian Demore, who will present the engineering division budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pease. Good morning, Mayor Murillo, members of the City Council. My name is Brian Demore, City Engineer for the Engineering Division here in Public Works. Today's budget presentation will include an overview of the division, highlights of each of the two engineering programs, the overall division budget, and then I will finish with our proposed adjustments. Next slide, please. The engineering division consists of two programs, the Engineering Services Program and the Land Development Engineering Program. Engineering Services is comprised of 4 sections, including Water Resources Engineering, Streets Engineering, Airport Engineering, and we have a Special Projects and Planning section. Land Development Engineering is comprised of 3 sections, including Development Review, Real Property, and Construction Inspection. Both programs are budgeted primarily out of the general fund, with roughly 90% of the general fund expenses reimbursed through a variety of sources based on actual activity within these programs. Next slide, please. Engineering Services is the largest of engineering's 2 programs with 35.2 FTEs. This program provides professional engineering and project management services in support of the city's capital projects. The majority of our work is internal to Public Works, supporting the essential operation of our water resources and streets infrastructure. We also manage or provide engineering support to capital projects at the airport, waterfront, for parks and recreation, as well as for police and fire. We are involved with projects from the initial planning and development phase and then through the design and construction phases. Effective project management requires constant awareness of the constraints of cost, schedule, and scope while striving to meet the expectations of many different project stakeholders. Highlights within this program include adjusting to remote office work and achieving our highest level of staff productivity. Also, we have somewhat recently completed the replacement of the Quinientos and De La Guerra Street bridges, and we have construction underway for the Las Positas multi-use pathway project. The overall budget is approximately $6.7 million, most of which will be reimbursed through hourly charges to various capital projects. Next slide. Land Development Engineering consists of 9.7 FTEs. This program is responsible for management of many construction-related activities within the city's right-of-way and the coordination between public and private projects. This includes the plan review and inspection of private work within the city's right-of-way. This program manages and operates the Public Works permits counter. Highlights within this program include ongoing field operations on a variety of projects, effectively transitioning all Public Works permit counter services to virtual, and in the process issuing 750 Public Works permits. Additionally, we are projected to complete the review of approximately 650 building permit applications. Staff from this program also participated in the outreach process and provided support to the city attorney's office in the development of a small cell facility ordinance. This is a general fund program with a proposed fiscal year 22 budget of approximately 1.85 million. And again, approximately 90% cost recovery. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed engineering revenues for fiscal year 22. In engineering services, engineering work order revenue is proposed to match the FY21 adopted budget. I am optimistic that actual revenue will show growth year over year, as revenue depends on capital program activity and the established rate structure. And our capital programs are well funded for at least the next couple of years. However, in looking at our rates, we may need to make a slight adjustment to account for the recent increase in benefit costs. In the land development engineering program, we are proposing revenue in fiscal year 22 to be near pre-pandemic levels. This reflects an anticipated increase in development activity, as well as a slight increase in fees. Overall, we are proposing a revenue that is essentially flat compared to the fiscal year 21 adopted budget. However, the proposed revenue does reflect a significant increase from what we are projecting at the end of year FY21. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed engineering expenditures for fiscal year 22, the combined expenditures for both programs. Overall, the proposal includes an increase that is primarily driven by increases in two separate areas. One, as I mentioned earlier, having to do with benefit costs. The other is an allocated cost increase in order to support the full cost recovery of management of our permit tracking software, Acela, which includes staff and maintenance agreements for that software. We are proposing savings through the following measures. We are planning to continue to keep a supervising engineer position vacant, that is in land development, as well as a reduction in supplies and services, mostly for professional support services, and a small reduction in special projects. Next slide. The proposed budget adjustments will impact service level within the two engineering programs. Land development engineering will potentially be most impacted due to the proposed vacant supervising engineer position. Although keeping this vacancy open will provide savings to the general fund, it may not be sustainable once land development activity returns to or rises above pre-pandemic levels. In the short term, this increases the workload for the principal engineer and the rest of the staff in this program and results in increased review time for certain permits. Reductions in supplies and services will delay some opportunities for employee training and development and may result in unplanned downtime for certain equipment. These are all short-term impacts. Next slide. That's the end of the engineering portion of this presentation. And it sounds like we're gonna move right along if there are no questions.
Well, this seems like a good time to ask if there's any questions so far.
Great.
Thanks, Mr. Demore.
I have a quick question. Sorry, I was slow on the draw. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Demore. So you mentioned a couple times predicting an increase in development in the next year, and I'm just interested in what type of development we're anticipating, and then if you're proposing maybe that once development does increase, then we might be able to fill that position based on the fees that we would be getting. Just a quick question on that.
Right. So thank you, Councilmember Snedden. I would say, it's with everything that's been impacted by COVID, very difficult to make any predictions that you're gonna feel great about. So the only thing I would say on development activity is that we hope to return to pre-pandemic levels of activity as quickly as possible. Whether it's gonna be higher than the pre-pandemic and when or what the mix of activity is, I think that's where it gets even more difficult to predict. And that's where the fees are different depending on what the activity is. So it's hard to say. It's just something we've got to keep a close eye on. And if we're unable to meet our customer demands because there's so much activity and we really are bringing in revenue associated with that, then at that point in time, it would make sense to revisit that vacancy.
Thank you. That makes sense. And then just one more quick question. Are you anticipating construction costs to increase for public works projects? Is that something that's built into the budget or something you'll just have to see as we go?
Right, Councilmember Snedden, that's a great question. And that's another thing where it's hard to see where that trend is going until you have enough data points. We have put out some projects recently and it's been a mix. We've seen one come in just last week and we got, actually two came in last week and one exceeded the engineer's estimate by quite a bit and one came in under by quite a bit. So it's hard to know and it might depend what sector it's in. But I would say in general, costs only go up and it feels like they're going up at a higher rate than we've seen probably in the last, the previous 5 years where things were just kind of slowly, that inflation was just really slow. So it's something we need to factor in if we have a project, especially if it's 5 or 10 years down the road where we anticipate construction.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Okay, let's carry on. Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Moore.
well then, with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Jim Dewey, Division Manager for Streets Operations and Infrastructure Management.
Thank you, Mr. Damore, and good morning, Mayor Murillo and council members. I'm Jim Dewey, the Streets Operations and Infrastructure Manager, and I'll be providing a division overview, program highlights, and our fiscal year 2021 budget and COVID-19 impacts to revenue and our mitigations. Next slide, please. The Streets Operations and Infrastructure Management Division is responsible for the design, operation, and maintenance for transportation assets in the public right-of-way. It includes 11 programs and has 40 full-time employees. Derek Bailey, our principal traffic engineer, and I manage the division. The division is funded by streets funds, primarily utility users tax and gas tax, Measure A sales tax, and the street sweeping fund, which is funded with a combination of Measure B funds and street sweeping citations. Our programs are grouped into 4 categories: traffic engineering, which includes our engineering group and traffic signal technicians; general maintenance, which includes traffic markings and signs and storm drain repair. Our paving crews and concrete crew perform our production paving, asphalt repair work, and sidewalk, ramp, curb, and gutter installations. Right-of-way services includes graffiti abatement, street sweeping, and other on-demand services, and the coordination with Union Pacific and the Cooperative Maintenance Agreement in their corridor. Next slide, please. I'm going to quickly cover each one of our programs. There's quite a few of them, but I'll just mention what it is they do and provide a quick summary. Transportation Administration provides for the accounting and funding of all transportation-related programs within Public Works and transfers to other city programs like street tree maintenance. Next slide, please. Roadway maintenance provides for the maintenance and operations of 245 miles of city streets and includes our production paving crew and asphalt repair crew. Next slide. Sidewalk maintenance maintains sidewalks, curb, gutter, and access ramps and is performed by our concrete crew. Next slide. Storm drain repair maintains our 99 miles of storm drain system and the operations of the Laguna Channel pump station. Next slide. Graffiti abatement responds to all graffiti in the public right-of-way. Next slide, please. Traffic markings and signs maintains all street and curb markings and maintains over 20,000 traffic signs. Next slide, please. Traffic Signals is a two-person crew who maintains all signalized intersections, pedestrian flashers, and all other electronic traffic control equipment in the public right-of-way. Next slide, please. Traffic Engineering designs, optimizes, and coordinates transportation systems throughout the city. Next slide, please. Streets Capital provides for the funding for maintenance, repair, and improvements of right-of-way assets with gas tax, utility users tax, and Measure A funds, and provides funding for alternative transportation improvements and bridge replacements through grants and supplemental funding. Next slide, please. Street sweeping keeps our city streets, creeks, and oceans clean. Next slide, please. Now I'll briefly share our responses to the pandemic and related budget impacts. Next slide. In order to ensure our crew resiliency, we separated our crew members for staggered crew shifts and implemented a number of safety protocols to keep our crews safe. Next slide, please. Most of our pandemic-related budget reductions were from keeping vacant positions open. Our crew worked full schedules during the pandemic, and we performed more crew paving work than ever before. But productivity with street signs and traffic marking maintenance did fall behind because of the budget reductions and the positions that we kept open this year. Next slide, please. I'll now provide an overview of our pavement maintenance program, looking at our progress through the FY 20, 21, and 22 programs. Next slide, please. This map shows what we've accomplished with our FY 20 pavement maintenance program, which is being completed this month. The map illustrates the pavement maintenance performed across all council districts. Overlay work consists of pavement replacement and street reconstruction. This happens when the pavement system comes to the end of its useful life. And here it's illustrated in blue on the map. Slurry seal projects consist of street resurfacing, crack sealing, and the application of pavement coatings designed to extend the life of existing pavement. It's shown on red on the map. Production paving work includes the production paving projects performed by our streets crews and point repairs throughout the city. This work is illustrated in black. Our streets crews work is a major part of our pavement maintenance program. In FY 20, the streets paving crew focused much of their effort on the residential areas in the South Mesa. Next slide, please. The fiscal year 21 program includes streets, production paving in Hidden Valley, paving around the area around Cottage Hospital and Las Canoas Road, and is currently in construction. And you can see that slurry seal was added to the South Mesa area, completing the pavement maintenance started by the streets crews work from the year before. Contract work for sidewalk replacements and additional curb ramps is being completed by contractors, and contractors continue to provide overlay to the downtown arterial and collector streets. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 22, streets crew paving is planned to repave the Samarkand neighborhood. Hidden Valley will get slurry seal on the streets that did not need paving the prior year. A large portion of Haley Street will be repaved with SB1 funds by contractors. Next slide, please. This map shows the combination of the work from the three preceding slides. The total paving maintenance represented here affects 73 miles of city streets. you can see that there's a fair distribution of work throughout the city and in each council district. Next slide, please. We'll now look at our budget overview. Next slide, please. So looking at our revenues, utility users tax, gas taxes, and Measure A sales tax funding didn't suffer as much as we anticipated from the pandemic effects in FY21. In FY22, we see increases in all these funding sources due to demand for gas, services, and local goods. So overall, we have a robust budget coming into FY22 and 23. Next slide. Some of the items to note on our expenditure side, supplies and services are being restored to normal spending for FY22 and 23. So there's some increases there. We are also increasing our transfers out for increased capital funding for Measure A and SB1, which will contribute to our pavement maintenance program. The major increases in FY21 projected spending reflect the grant funding that was appropriated after the budget adoption. And Jessica Grant will talk about those projects after my presentation. The capital line item shows increased funding for FY21 adopted budget to FY22 proposed. This increase comes from increased Measure A and SB1 capital funding. Next slide, please. This table shows major funding for the maintenance of assets in the public right-of-way. As you can see, streets maintenance is heavily dependent on Measure C funding and has almost $2 million coming from SB1 road maintenance and rehabilitation account. Next slide, please. This slide shows a chart on the left of our current pavement condition index and the projected pavement condition based on different funding levels. I'd also like to point out our funding sources for pavement maintenance program on the right. So the major funding sources for our pavement maintenance program are highlighted in green, which includes the Measure C overlay paving, SB1 overlay paving, sidewalk access ramps, and sidewalk repairs. The total of this is $15.2 million for fiscal year 22. This funding is helping us to improve the condition of our pavement, moving from the average at-risk condition to the good and excellent category. Next slide, please. This slide shows an enlargement of the pavement condition index chart from the previous slide. Our current investment in pavement maintenance is improving our PCI. We need to continue to invest around a minimum of $12 million per year in FY21 dollars, as illustrated by the blue line on the curve, to reach our goals to move out of the at-risk category. So as you can see, we're illustrating where we're going to be in FY22 after a $15.2 million investment, and where we're going to be in FY23, moving up to a 65 PCI with a $13.4 million investment. And then we show a curve illustrating 4 different funding levels: $14 million investment, $12 million investment, 10, and 7. Next slide, please. I want to take time to celebrate with you the work of our streets crews. All of our crews have been showing up every day during the pandemic to maintain our transportation infrastructure. The work of our streets production paving crews making a huge contributions to improving the condition of our streets. The crew has paved over 50 city blocks this year and will perform even more paving service in fiscal years 22 and 23. Next slide, please. I will now take your questions, and if we have time, I have a video to share with you that captures our who our production paving crew is and what they do.
We love videos. Oh, Mr. Friedman has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Dewey. I think you answered it, but I just want to be sure when on the slide on the preservation, the funding maintenance for the PCI, in our budget binder, it says we are about 63. And if I was reading that chart right, we're slowly getting up to that 70 with the level of investment. And we could be there in a few years, depending on that. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that right. And then prior to Measure C, we've been declining based on that chart, it looks like. So I just wanted to make sure that when we're looking at investments that we could get to that 70% not in the next few years if we invest properly.
Yes, if you take a look at the slide, I don't think we're going to move backwards to it, but the slide in the presentation, if we continue investing $12 million, we will move, out of the at-risk category and achieve a PCI of above 70 and continue with that. That funding will be critical at that level. And we are, continuing to increase our PCI now. So Measure C has been a lifesaver for our streets and infrastructure. There's no doubt about that. Before Measure C, we were only contributing about $2 million a year. And there's another curve that shows that too. And it's trends downward pretty quickly. And, of course, as our streets begin to degrade, it takes even more costs in order to bring them up to a satisfactory condition. So it really is a good investment for us to invest in all the different treatments, both slurry seals and overlays at the proper time. So we're grateful to people of Santa Barbara for providing this funding, and we're putting it to good use.
Thank you, Mr. Drew. It's great news that we're getting that curve back up and approaching the 70% within the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Dewey. That for the different streets of the overlays of the pavement updates and the sidewalk updates, I just thank you for Las Canoas. I think a lot of people are going to be very happy about that. And I'm just looking at APS, it was broken into two parts. And is sidewalk maintenance part of the APS plan down by the Mission? We get a lot of calls about the sidewalks there.
Councilmember Sneddon, there is a request to rebuild the pathway through the park there, and that would be funded separately. Right now, there isn't any plan, as far as extending the sidewalk, at least not in our maintenance program. Of course, we can apply for grants and continue that corridor. So that would be an improvement that would be funded usually through an active transportation grant, and but that's not part of our standard maintenance program at this point.
And so for not extending, but just for maintenance of the sort of sidewalk path that's already there along APS, not through the parks, but there are a lot of walkers on the sidewalk part. I can ask you in more detail later too, but there's already sort of existing sidewalk structure.
Okay, we will continue to maintain any sidewalk that's there, and that'll include sidewalk grinding and padding. And then when we have major uplifts, we will go in and replace those. So we replace a lot of sidewalk as part of our pavement maintenance program. And then also our sidewalk maintenance program is, we replace a lot of sidewalks with our crews also.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It's just amazing what you've all been able to do through pandemic, and everywhere you just see updated pavement, updated sidewalk, and it's really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this juncture? Or how long is your video? Is it a short one? Oh.
It's 5 minutes, so you could play it now or play it at the end if we have time. It's up to you.
Well, let's hear Mr. Gutierrez's questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Dewey. I just have a general question. A lot of news has been happening involving our aging infrastructure, and I just wonder if there's anything in our city that you feel like needs immediate attention.
Councilmember Gutierrez, we evaluate all of our assets in the right of way continuously. And so the things that we've prioritized are, pretty much what we are addressing right now. We don't have any major issues that would be an emergency at this point. We're on top of our bridge replacement programs. We have a plan for all of our streets. We don't have anything that is a major safety issue right now. So we're just continuing to prioritize, where our investment needs to be made, based on our pavement condition index and all of the other evaluations that we make. So there isn't anything that's out there that is a major issue at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's keep going, and then we'll remember that we can close with the video. Is that okay with you?
That's great. And now I'd like to introduce our Supervising Transportation Planner, Jessica Grant, who will present the transportation planning budget.
Thanks, Mr. Dewey. Welcome, Ms. Grant.
Yes, good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Jessica Grant, Supervising Transportation Planner, here with Sarah Clark, Parking Supervisor, to present the Transportation Planning and Parking Budget. Next slide, please. This is our team, headed by Rob Dayton. With the retirement of Victor Garza earlier this year, the Downtown Plaza and Parking Manager position is vacant, and we are currently waiting approval to fill the position permanently. In the meantime, the Downtown Parking Supervising Team has kept the section running. Brian Bossy also started this week on special assignment to backfill the manager position part-time. Sarah Clark will discuss the parking budget shortly. I supervise the transportation planning section, and I will discuss our work efforts, what we've been doing during the pandemic, our budget, and highlight some of our capital projects. We have 3 programs: transportation planning, alternative transportation, and the employee work trip program. Next slide. The largest part of our work effort is implementing the general plan circulation element, bicycle and pedestrian master plans, and the Vision Zero strategy for both land development and capital projects. Our planning documents often include active transportation and safety infrastructure projects that we seek grant funding for. We have been quite successful to date, receiving over $40 million in grant funds in recent years for active transportation infrastructure. We're also staff liaisons to the city's Transportation Circulation Committee. Next slide. On January 28th of this year, we launched the city's pilot bike share program with the help of our operator, B-Cycle. The total rollout will have approximately 500 docks and 250 pedal assist electric bikes. Currently, we have 85 electric bikes in operation with 178 docks. As of the end of April, these are our statistics. I want to highlight that there's been over 500 passes sold and over 42,000 miles ridden so far as from this pilot. And we're currently installing more locations and hope to install docks in the coastal zone at the end of June, pending the California Coastal Commission approval. Next slide. We also manage the contract with Coast for the Safe Routes to School program. As you know, biking really increased in popularity during the pandemic, and Coast was there to provide Safe Routes to School safety presentations online to our local schools. Coast also did helmet distributions and led smaller pod neighborhood rides with kids. Next slide. We also participate in regional planning efforts. I serve as the vice chair for the SBCAG's Technical Transportation Advisory Committee. A lot of our recent discussion has been on the Highway 101 HOV and widening project. SBCAG is actively seeking to fund the remaining freeway segments that are located in the city. of Santa Barbara and County to lessen traffic congestion from Santa Barbara to Ventura. We've also been participating in SBCAG's Connected 2050 Regional Transportation Plan update. Next slide. For the Employee Work Trip Program headed by Sam Furtner, we subsidize the operation of various transit assistance and transportation demand management programs. Employee commuting behaviors really changed during the pandemic as many employees worked from home. For the employees still coming into the office, we were allowed to operate carpools with a maximum of 2 employees per car. Next slide. Our team did amazing during the pandemic. I can't thank our land development team enough for keeping all the plan reviews on track as we successfully transitioned to electronic plan checks. We were even able to do some field inspections remotely and then still continue with on-site inspections with COVID safety protocols in place. And we were also able to transition our Transportation Circulation Committee meetings online. And we were also able to have successful community outreach meetings online for our active transportation projects. We noticed the level of participation online was either equal to or higher than our in-person meetings. Next slide. For our proposed revenues, I just wanted to highlight the Measure A sales tax. That feeds directly into the Easy Lift program. Easy Lift provides transportation to frail seniors and those living with disabilities seeking to access programs and services in our community. In the other revenues category, we saw a drop in revenue during the pandemic as the majority of employees enrolled in the work trip program worked from home. The small revenues that we did see is our share of costs for the employee payroll deductions. Next slide. For their allocated costs, they're decreased by $22,000 in fiscal year 22, mainly due to reduced vehicle replacement and maintenance costs for the employee work trip program. Expenditures are projected to have substantial savings in fiscal year 21 to reduce spending for both due to reduced spending of the rideshare employee bus programs as a result of the pandemic. Next slide. Transitioning to our Streets Transportation Capital Program, I want to draw your attention to the $26 million that we've appropriated in grant funding for fiscal year 21. The bulk of the streets capital budget goes to pavement maintenance and maintenance of our existing infrastructure. So to have anything new transportation, active transportation or safety infrastructure, we need to seek grant opportunities and leverage the remaining funds of our streets capital for matching funds. Now I will highlight some of our active transportation projects. Next slide. This is the Las Positas and multi-use path that began construction in September of 2020. This is a Vision Zero project. It provides a 2.6 mile off-street path for cyclists, runners, and walkers, connecting to critical connections to the neighborhoods, La Cumbre Junior High, Healings Park, and Henry's Beach, as well as to our local and regional bike network. This is primarily funded from the Active Transportation Program, and construction is estimated to be complete in March of 2022. Next slide. Currently in final design is the East Side and West Side community paseos projects, with construction anticipated in early 2022 and primarily funded by the Active Transportation Program. These active transportation projects provide critical connections not only within the East Side and West Side neighborhoods, but from those neighborhoods to downtown. And this fulfills the Bicycle Master Plan goal to have strong east-west connections in our city. We've recently had very productive field meetings with 2 committee members from the Historic Landmarks Commission and our project landscape architect on a few of the downtown intersections. And we're currently finalizing the landscape plans now due to their great feedback. Next slide. The Vision Zero US 101 State Street Undercrossing project is also in final design. The project includes widening sidewalks under the underpass from Yananali to Gutierrez Streets and reducing the travel lanes to accommodate buffered bike lanes. Construction is anticipated in 2023. This is a great project as it provides critical connections between downtown and the waterfront. Next slide. This is just an illustration of what it will look like under the underpass. Next slide. Another Vision Zero active transportation project in final design is the downtown De La Vina buffered bike lanes and safe crossings project. De La Vina will have a buffered bike lane between Carrillo and Haley Streets, and there will be several intersections that will have safety enhancements. Next slide. We were the only city in the county to receive grant funding in this last active transportation program cycle. This was the most competitive cycle to date, and we were fortunate to get funding for the Upper De La Vina Gap Closure and Safe Crossings project, which is very similar to the downtown one in final design. There happens to be a state surplus, and there's a potential for $500 million to go back in the active transportation program. That being said, our Cliff Drive and Westside projects did score fairly high, and we feel we're positioned well if the state does have that augmented funding for the program. Next slide. A regional transportation project that our team has been a part of with SBCAG, Caltrans, and the county is the Olive Mill Roundabout project. The roundabout is mitigation of the US 101 widening project to reduce traffic congestion at this intersection. The project is going into final design with construction anticipated in 2023. Do you want to say that all of these capital projects are a successful team approach with traffic operations and the streets engineering design teams? That concludes my portion of the presentation, and I could hand it off to Sarah Clark to discuss downtown parking.
Sounds good, Ms. Grant. Thank you so much. Welcome, Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Ms. Grant and council members. I am Sarah Clark. I am the Parking Program Supervisor for Downtown Parking. As Ms. Grant mentioned, our manager position is currently vacant following the retirement of Victor Garza, but Roy Forney, Dion Tate, and I have been holding down the fort in the meantime. If we can go to the next slide, please. So over the past few years, downtown parking has taken on a greater role in the downtown plaza, and this year we proposed some changes to our budget to realign our programs so that our budget is more reflective of our current responsibilities. So that's why you see two new programs here. In addition to our PBIA operations, our parking operations, transportation demand, and capital programs, we've added a new program for our work efforts in the downtown plaza, and we have formalized the Downtown Ambassador program as part of our ongoing operation. So you're going to see this reflected a little bit later when we dive into our revenues and expenditures. Next slide, please. So here we have 6 programs, but what does downtown parking do? So our primary and most visible responsibility is operating and maintaining the 15 public parking lots in the downtown area, keeping them clean and safe, and hiring, training, and supervising all the hourly staff that run the lots and assist the customers on their way in and out. We also work in close partnership with our local school districts to provide the crossing guard services and get kids to school safely. Next slide. This past year, the downtown parking took over responsibility for maintaining the downtown plaza. This means that we oversee contractors who provide janitorial services, power wash the sidewalks, maintain the landscape, and hang the flags up each week. Next slide. We are continuing to run the Downtown Ambassador program, which took on an added importance this past year with the city's pandemic response. The ambassadors continue their daily patrols and are our eyes and ears downtown, where they can really respond quickly to nuisance calls and identify maintenance needs. They work very closely with social services organizations so that they can connect unhoused people to service providers. And they're constantly reaching out to the businesses in downtown where they not only get feedback, but they're also valuable tools for when the city needs to get a message out. Next slide, please. Downtown Parking also manages on-street parking citywide, including loading zones, accessible parking zones, and timed parking zones. We administer the resident permit parking program, the oversized vehicle program, the monthly and commuter parking permit programs, and the new EV charging station permit program. We also run the Bike Spot secure bicycle parking facility in the Granada Garage. Next slide. The pandemic hit downtown parking operations especially hard, and staff deserves an enormous amount of credit for quickly making big changes to our operations to retool everything and make it safe. So as you know, when everything locked down last March, we had to suspend fee collection in our parking lots and lay off nearly all of our operators. In fiscal year 21, as things started to reopen and a little bit of demand started to return to the lots, staff then had to rehire and get everything running again. So everyone who was laid off was offered a chance to return, and a lot of people took us up on that offer. Some chose not to. Our parking coordinators then had to retrain everyone on how to operate under COVID safe protocols, which is basically a full 180 from the way that we used to operate. So before the pandemic, our focus was always on a high touch customer experience, having the operator greet each customer at the gate and handle their transaction for them. Post-COVID, the focus is now on encouraging customers to process their own transactions using our touchless payment methods at the exit columns. So while we still have our staff out there to assist, we're now focused on encouraging self-service. We've also moved most of our public counter services online, so customers can now submit applications and schedule appointments for in-person services as needed. We also help businesses that were closed for in-person service to establish temporary curbside pickup zones to make delivery easier. And then, of course, the biggie, the most visible one, is facilitating the closure of State Street and allowing downtown businesses to expand outdoors and establishing the Parklet program citywide. Next slide. Of course, for our budget, the big story of COVID is the drop in revenues. Parking demand was down about 48% from pre-pandemic levels, and you see this reflected in the big drop in fees and service charges. So in a typical year, this would be around $7 million, but for fiscal year 21, we knew that we would take a big hit, so we budgeted at 5.3, but we're only on track to see about $2.7 million in revenue this year for fees and service charges. Fortunately, we're starting to see demand slowly start to recover, and we're hoping that this trend continues into FY22, but we're still expecting to be well below where we normally would for the coming year. You'll note a big change here for interfund reimbursements. This is mostly due to the program realignment I discussed earlier rather than actual changes to revenue levels. The only major change here is for the Downtown Ambassador Program. So since the Ambassador Program was established about 4 years ago, we've been receiving $150,000 a year from the general fund to support that. For most of that time, we were able to double that using funds that were received from a tobacco cessation grant that the city got. But those extra funds have been used up. So this year we are asking to increase the general fund contribution to $300,000 to allow the program to continue at the same level that we've had in years past. Next slide, please. So first off, when it comes to our expenditures, it's worth noting that our salaries and benefits will be staying fairly constant from FY21 into FY22, but this still represents a $500,000 savings over our pre-pandemic costs. This is due largely to the more flexible lot staffing model we've developed to respond to changes in parking demand. And looking ahead into FY22, it accounts for a shift towards a more automated model of lot operations with fewer staff out in the kiosks. You'll see some bigger changes under special projects and supplies and services, and this is again from that program realignment. We moved the funding for the downtown maintenance contracts from special projects and from our capital fund up into supplies and services, but that increase is also due to what we expect will be a pretty big jump in credit card fees. So again, before the pandemic, only about 40% of our customers paid with credit cards, but now we're encouraging touchless self-service payments at the exit columns. And as we automate the lots, we're going to be trying to get all of our customers to pay using credit cards. So those fees are going to jump up. Next slide, please. So what were we up to this past year? Well, again, the biggest and most visible project was facilitating the closure of State Street to cars and opening it up to bikes and pedestrians, and quickly putting together a parklet program for the rest of the city. This allowed businesses to expand out into the street and remain open in some capacity, even while indoor services were shut down. And this turned out to be very popular, and it really has brought some new life into the State Street Promenade during what was otherwise a pretty grim time. It hasn't been without its challenges, but the program is continuing to evolve, and we look forward to developing a more long-term vision for State Street and helping to bring that to life. Next slide. And this year, downtown parking took over responsibility for maintaining the State Street Promenade. Previously, the city had provided funding to downtown Santa Barbara, who then managed various contractors. But this year we brought that in-house, and we're overseeing contracts for janitorial services, landscape maintenance, sidewalk power washing, and the flag program. As a result, we've been able to increase our presence in the plaza and really respond quickly to any needs that arise. And downtown Santa Barbara has been able to really focus their energy and their expertise on marketing and events, so that together we're really ready to welcome people back to downtown. Next slide. Next, I'd like to talk more about something that I touched on earlier, which is the more responsive staffing model we're using out in our lots. When we first started to reopen, parking demand was way down and our budget had taken a huge hit. So it was really important as we began to staff up again that we only keep people out in the lots when we were able to generate enough revenue to cover those staffing costs. We started only staffing very limited hours, but as demand has picked up and businesses have opened back up, we've gradually extended those hours strategically and in certain lots in order to capture as much revenue as possible while still keeping costs manageable, and of course, providing the highest level of customer service possible. So every day now we look at our revenue in each lot, we look at the hours we're open and the number of cars that were in the lot, and we make adjustments and really fine tune our staffing to be as efficient as possible and provide the best service possible. Next slide. And our office operations have had to change a lot too. Previously, all of our permit applications were handled either in person or by mail, but this past year we were finally able to get those things online. So now customers can submit their permit applications, whether it's for residential or oversized vehicles or commuter permit, online, and then we can mail out their permits or they can come pick them up with our contactless drop basket. This is something we had been waiting to implement for a long time, and we're excited to be able to continue to offer this service to our customers from here on out, even once we're fully reopened. In the meantime, when someone really needs in-person service, they can book an appointment online and then come into our office where we can help them out. Next slide. And the crossing guards are back. So now that schools are reopening, we've got the crossing guards back on board helping kids get to school safely, and we need more. So if anybody is looking for a job, please send them our way. The crossing guard program and the lot operators are hiring. So finally, next slide, please. Our capital program has been cut back basically just to critical safety and maintenance needs. We've put everything else on pause. The two exceptions for this past year have been for the revenue control system upgrades, which you can now use as you're leaving our lots. You've got new touchless and PCI compliant payment options on that exit column. And then the upcoming automated license plate recognition project. The installation of this equipment is already underway. You might see some of those cameras starting to pop up at our lots, but they won't be turned on until later this summer or fall, and we don't expect to begin seeing those staffing changes until after the holidays. Beyond that, we did have a few Measure C projects, mostly in the promenade with intersection improvements and lighting, but you'll hear more about that with the rest of the Measure C budget. So I thank you for your time. With that, Ms. Grant and I will take your questions before handing it over to Angela Osland, our facilities manager.
Okay, let's see if there's questions at this point. Your division does so much. Ms. Clark, thanks for everything you do. I love it, the crossing guards and the parklets. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Clark. I have a couple of questions. They may be for you, Ms. Clark, but I wasn't sure where to ask them. So the first one has to do with street lighting. And there's a couple issues. One is over in the Pine Drive area, and also Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez was mentioned this to me as well. Lighting on Milpas. How do we get additional lighting or make a request to take a look at lighting issues for Milpas Street and over in the Pine Drive area up by Las Positas? see Ms. Grant, you have a light on. So those two areas in particular.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Friedman. With respect to the lighting along Milpas Street, it's the lighting is generally good along the corridor. We have an issue with the tree, the very mature tree canopy, and we work closely with the Parks and Rec Department for tree maintenance. One of the items during the outreach that we did probably about a year and a half ago about the Milpas corridor improvements for active transportation infrastructure is we did hear for additional lighting at the intersections. So all legs of the crosswalks could be lit. So it would be lighting the additional legs as you travel up and down Milpas Street. That is something that we did apply for active transportation funding for on this last grant cycle. We did not receive the funding. We will continue to pursue future funding cycles for the active transportation program on that, or we might have a revised or scaled down project just to focus on those intersection improvements. And
Thank you, Amy. On the Pine Drive, I'd just like to talk maybe offline about how we can address that area because there's some crime issues in that neighborhood and there isn't a lot of lighting, but I just wanted to raise it and talk with you or whoever is in charge of that or can oversee it, so put offline because it's kind of a newer issue that's just came up in the last couple of weeks. I do have a couple other questions. One was because it came up, what is the status of the Allen Road crosswalk flashing light that we got the grant for?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Friedman. For the status for the Allen Road crossing, there will be a temporary flasher system of the rapid flashing beacons installed in the next 6 to 8 weeks. We did get a grant from the Highway Safety Improvement Program to have permanent improvements at that intersection. So the temporary installation would just be through solar, but the permanent would be hardwiring that intersection for the flashers, just so they're more dependable. And also, again, depending upon how the state budget shakes out, this is also an overlap area of the Cliff multi-use path project as well.
Great, that's great news. So in about 6 to 8 weeks, we'll have the temporary flasher that will improve pedestrian safety as we go into the beach summer. And one last question, I'm not sure if it's for you, but the street sweeping, is that you, Ms. Grant, or is, I can hold that question.
Mr. Dewey could pop on for that.
Sorry about that, I meant to ask it earlier, but got a little confused on it. So on street sweeping, I know there was a number of issues with the contractor that we were working to address, and just wanted to see if we've been able to increase their performance level and we've addressed those issues and how they're performing in terms of the street sweeping.
Councilmember Friedman, we did have a vendor who was sweeping the residential portion of our street sweeping program that was struggling to meet our goals. And before, a few months ago, we renegotiated the deal. They really wanted to vacate their contract. We allowed them to do that. And we brought on another contractor based out of Ventura who's been performing very well. So we've been really happy with the results of the new contractor, and we have a multi-year contract option with them. So we're in much better shape than we were before the last year.
Great, thank you. I'm glad that was able to address and get a new contractor. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Gutierrez, go ahead.
Good morning. I want to thank you guys for all the work that you've done in my district. Going back on the lights on Milpas, I know you've been working on Milpas and the lights are a lot better. Thank you very much. And with the streets, it's such a huge difference. But we've noticed, especially a lot of the owners there, that when it rains, the lights will go off. And I just wanted to make you guys aware of, you guys can just double check of what's going on. One of the owners said it might be the GFIs. I'm not sure what that is, but especially when they put the Christmas lights, the community there spends a lot of energy and money to make Milpas a little bit brighter. And so when it rains, we get these lights on Milpas that are not working. But I do appreciate all the work that you've done. Thank you so much for adding those extra lights, helping adding those extra lights on Liberty Street. Thank you so much. The community there is so grateful for that. There is another street, and we can talk offline. It's Ensenada, I believe, that there's no lights. It's just very black when it's dark. But I just wanted to thank you guys for being so responsive. Yeah, thank you so much.
Ms. Oslin, did you have something to add about the lights?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Murillo and Alejandro Gutierrez, Councilor. So building maintenance is the kind of overseer of lights maintenance on Milpas. Feel free to reach out to us. I'll send forward our information so that if you do hear concerns or complaints or needs, you can forward that on to us and we'll enter that into our work order system.
Thank you. My other question is in regards of the sidewalks on Milpas. I don't know if I would like just to have it kind of in mind in the future, start looking on those sidewalks to make improvements there. I know the trees are a big issue, but I would like to maybe get some evaluation of maybe the cost and bringing in also, the businesses and the community members to help. And I want my district to understand the process. We can't just say, hey, we want new sidewalks. I want them to understand the process and how much it's going to cost. But I just wanted your department to be aware that that's a huge need there on Milpas as well to fix those sidewalks.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. Yes, we definitely the need. We did apply for the Active Transportation Program funding to repair and widen the sidewalks, and of course improve the intersection crossings and add additional street lighting at the intersections. The price tag for that is approximately $27 million. Is what we're looking at, and we're going to continue to actively seek funding for that.
Thank you for that information.
Any other questions for these folks? Thanks for what you do. I'll just thank you right now for being so good at securing grants. You're awesome at that, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for the ones that are pending. Well, please carry on. We're ready to keep going. Okay, thanks. Ms. Oslin, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Murillo and members of the council. Thank you also, Ms. Clark and Ms. Grant. My name is Angela Oslin. I'm the Facilities Division Manager for Public Works. We appreciate the opportunity to share our budget presentation with you today, as well as some accomplishments over the past year. Next slide, please. And Facilities Management is an internal services funded division providing services to city departments through its 6 programs and 37.8 FTEs. Here you can see our team members: Joe Gonzalez, Building Maintenance; Mike McNeil for Electronic Maintenance; Jason Valenzuela, overseeing Custodial Services; Brad Cleansing as the Supervisor for Capital Projects; and Senan Aparicio for Environmental Compliance. The Facilities Fund was established to recover the costs of operating and maintaining citywide buildings and facilities through building maintenance, communications, custodial services, and capital renewals, and all of the work items that are included therein. Next slide, please. COVID-19 lessons learned. Well, we've continued to be flexible and responsive throughout this COVID-19 pandemic by coming up with creative solutions to issues we haven't faced before. Thanks to the pandemic, we are rethinking how we might manage security and safety in our buildings through modifications and enhancements. And some of these lessons learned include how we can maintain operations and city functions safely, including social distancing, teams, tasking, telecommuting, and shift changes. And that we need to work closely with our risk management on facilities operations throughout COVID-19 and as we transition into our building reopening, utilizing cleaning products that kill our virus and working with purchasing to procure cleaning products, how to expand the limits of our current technology to include virtual meetings with our consultants, our contractors, our staff, and also including virtual on-site inspections, modifying program delivery by maintaining flexibility, such as contracting services to our central library in order for them to be able to maintain the ability to serve the public in the flexibility of the changing tiers and hours of operations. Of course, coordination with our customers on the timing of non-emergency maintenance in order to keep our frontline and first responders safe, including fire department, police department as some examples. And finally, mid-pandemic, we received the results of the Woodhill Group report, which was a study that took a look at facilities, fleet, IT services, and funds. And now we were able to implement changes throughout this COVID-19 year. And it provided us the opportunity to evaluate all of our program areas again. And we determined that the next steps are to bring in a consultant in phase 2 to perform a financial operations study for a 10-year plan for facilities in partnership with fleet and IT. Next slide. Thank you. This slide shows what we expect to experience in fiscal year 22 with regard to our service level impacts. We are expecting to resume work that was delayed due to social distancing and employee safety. By that we meant there were some building closures, so closed to the public or limited operations. We're continuing to hold some positions vacant in order to realize some savings. And we're going to experience some reduction in customer service to other departments, mostly due to time to complete projects or special projects because of building closures. In capital projects, this coming year, we're going to reduce $158,000 to our capital outlay for completing capital renewals. And we're going to be working with Measure C funds on projects to stretch those dollars to accomplish some of the facilities backlog maintenance that we wouldn't have covered with that money while making improvements to our buildings. And also, again, organizational operational changes that are in response to this report we talked about, and also the coming rate development and evaluation for our future budget cycles. Next slide, please. The building maintenance program provides both maintenance and capital renewal for general fund facilities. Facilities also oversees the maintenance and replacement of city streetlights, as we talked about earlier. The total building maintenance budget is planned for $3.6 million. The bulk of the building maintenance budget is funded through allocated costs. The remainder of the revenue comes from special project work orders. It's about $650,000 annually. Also included in this budget is the Annex Yard Operations Fund at $275,000. In fiscal year 22, we will be directing only $470,000 towards facilities capital, rather than about the $638,000 that we diverted last year. As you've heard through our public works, our staff throughout facilities have been able to pivot and respond to COVID-19, and we've gotten some great work accomplished. Some of our program highlights include fabricating and constructing the new iron fence over at the Palm Park Center, previously called Chase Palm Park Center. We've replaced 4 emergency streetlight knockdowns in addition to other regular streetlight repairs. We've repainted the exterior of the Spencer Adams Lawn Bowl. We've responded to over 50 graffiti cleanup calls. We replaced the Upper State Street lighting with LED upgrades as planned and in partnership with the Energy and Climate Division. And we were able to build plexiglass partitions and hand sanitizing stations for our city buildings and other items in response to COVID-19. Next slide, please. The electronic maintenance program is budgeted at $1.3 million. This year, some of our program highlights included installing Kronos terminals to support city IT. This is for a timekeeping system. Building new phone systems for supporting the new energy and climate division. Building bilingual phone systems to support our face masking reporting, our Tego Park mural program, our rent eviction, and our State Street business improvement services to the public. Of course, we also installed access control at various locations and installed new security cameras and systems citywide. We modified telephone systems supporting hundreds of telecommuters, so we were able to help maintain keeping city operations moving forward. Next slide. I want to take a moment here and really highlight custodial services. Our staff has done an incredible job of being proactive, responsive, flexible, and accommodating in the wake of this pandemic. I'm incredibly proud of how our staff have supported our city and our community through this past year. And while we've learned how to adapt to this new communicable disease in an event of this size, we found that the tools that we had were already in place. So examples include city training programs, thank you to risk management, hazmat certification held by our custodial supervisor, and the foundation of our expertise in industry standards and practices that prepared us really to deliver our services efficiently and effectively. And still, we're excited for additional changes in the future that are going to better enhance our program delivery for health and sanitation. With that, we are currently budgeted at $1.77 million. And our program highlights include our COVID pandemic response, particularly sanitizing high traffic areas and high touch areas as examples. Our COVID-19 exposure cleaning and sanitizing, which is a reported COVID-19 exposure event in our city facilities. Shift changes to improve our customer service, including changing work locations, hours, and duties to accommodate this ever-changing pandemic. Providing improved flexibility at Central Library to support their operations, as we discussed. Emergency cleanings, for example, public restrooms and associated locations due to unexpected events and overuse. And standing up a green cleaning program, including training for our employees and incorporating environmentally friendly products into our work. Next slide, please. Environmental compliance program is funded directly by the general fund, but managed within the facilities division. Excuse me. The fiscal year 2022 budget is budgeted at $474,000. And some of our program highlights include responding to bee swarm and hive complaints. There were 59 in 2021. Last year in FY20, we received 76 and responded to those. Hazardous materials cleanups. So far this year, we've responded to 15. The year isn't over yet. Last year, we responded to a total of 14. Our vector control is down. What this means is we are realizing that all of the really great work that the downtown businesses and downtown parking are doing is keeping our rodent population down. And we anticipate the same trend to continue in FY 2022. We realized a removal of about 24,000 pounds of contaminants at the police station site. And then finally, our staff has been working with regulators to receive approximately $500,000 in reimbursements through the underground storage tank reimbursement program. This money isn't here yet, but we expect to receive it in very early FY 2022. Next slide, please. Our capital projects program consists of, again, about $470,000 in general funding and about $2.095 million in Measure C projects for this coming year. The capital projects group oversees the design and construction of city facilities. This slide here shows the design and rendering of Library Plaza. We're excited that the final design will wrap up here in the next few weeks and then will be advertised for construction this summer. Other program highlights include the renovation of Mackenzie Park restrooms, the repaving of the corporate yard over the Garden Street complex, a new roof at Mackenzie Center, and designing and constructing internally our bike rack at the Central Library, all completed by city staff. And finally, again, designing and construction management of the Central Library elevator, Carrillo Gym repairs, and plaza, as we talked about. And next slide. We'll also overseeing our capital projects discretionary budget. This slide shows a breakdown of the capital projects budget, the major differences in FY 2022 over 2021 is that we're eliminating the capital outlay to the finishes item. We're reducing the capital outlay to maintain our status quo budget in the building maintenance program and not have to utilize reserves in FY 2022. Next slide, please. This slide shows a summary of the capital projects that we've planned to work on in fiscal year 2022. We're budgeting for, again, 2.095 million. And as you can see, we have several projects that we're excited to be working on and tackling this coming year, including a major project. We have 630 Garden 3 projects at that location. And we're also planning to support some of the ADA transition work and walkway work for the site for the 630 Garden building with our walkways funding. Next slide, please. Here's a snapshot of our facilities fund budget and includes our COVID-19 reductions and concessions. And as you can see, this is really a status quo budget with the increase in salaries and benefits being the main contributor to the increase in this budget. And of course, these are updates from the allocations that come from finances Mr. Hagmark talked about earlier. Next slide. I wanted to share this project with you. This is the finished Chase Palm Park minor renewal, now the Palm Park Center. This is an example of some of the great work that we've been able to accomplish as one city. This project was funded with Measure C funds. This facility was closed to the public last year due to COVID-19. It gave us the opportunity to get in there and get some great work done. City painters, electricians, carpenters tackled this project along with contractors overseen by capital projects to deliver the vision of the Parks and Recreation events, Parks, Recreation, and planning teams. We were able to leverage city staff to stretch the dollars to complete this work on this beautiful building in July of 2022. And with that, thank you for listening to our presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions. If there are none, I will turn it over to Mr. Horwold for fleet management.
Let's see if anyone pops on. Congratulations on the Chase Palm Park project.
Thank you.
A beautiful space we all love. Okay, let's carry on with the presentation. Thanks, Ms. Osmond. Hi, Mr. Horwold.
Good morning, Mayor Murillo and members of City Council. My name is Gary Horwold. I'm the fleet manager for the city, and I am pleased to have the opportunity to provide you an overview of the fiscal year 22 budget for fleet management. Next slide, please. Fleet management has two programs, the Fleet Maintenance and Operations and the Fleet Replacement Program. Sam Harmon is the fleet supervisor. There are 15 full-time employees that make up fleet management. Next slide, please. What do we do in fleet management? Well, we maintain 485 vehicles and equipment, including emergency standby power generators. We manage a shared motor pool of 25 vehicles. We manage 5 refueling sites within the city. We ensure that all systems comply with environmental regulations. The replacement value of the fleet is over $46 million. We manage the vehicle replacement program, including specification development, procurement, and disposal services, and financial forecasting and planning. Next slide, please. In response to the pandemic, fleet staff was all working during the pandemic. You can't maintain vehicles at home. It's something we've got to do here. So fleet staff are all considered essential workers. Without fleet, first responders don't roll. During the pandemic, we prioritized emergency vehicles, and initially to keep staff safe, we split the staff into 2 non-overlapping groups, working 13-hour shifts 6 days per week, increasing fleet staff availability in the process. That went on for about 3 months, but proved to be too daunting, especially for our commuters. We had to adjust accordingly. Next slide, please. We also updated our pool vehicle and rideshare policy, limiting passengers, including the driver, to 2 people per vehicle in an attempt to maximize social distancing as much as possible. We disinfect each vehicle during servicing. This picture shows one of our technicians, Matt Thomas, wearing the disinfectant pack that is used to spray and disinfect the interior. We call it the Ghostbuster pack. Next slide, please. We were asked to cut 5% from our operating budget in response to the pandemic, in which we did by holding a technician position open that was currently vacant, saving about $101,000 along the way, along with a variety of smaller cuts. We deferred vehicle replacement. In fiscal year 20, we saved $1.2 million. In 21, we saved $2.8 million. And in 22, we're planning on purchasing 32 vehicles and deferring 43 vehicles across the next 5 years. We accomplished this by taking a hard look at which vehicles can live longer, extending life cycles, and spreading out the replacement plan in future years. Some of our upcoming priority projects for 22. We're planning on a pilot program to lease 2 fire rigs for the first time instead of purchasing them. With interest rates somewhere between 1 and 2.75%, they're so low right now that it makes this an attractive option. Second, we plan on continuing what you heard Angela Oslin speak about with the ICS audit, planning to evaluate our fee structure, evaluate the fleet reserve balance and funding model, and evaluate and make recommendations to improve financial transparency to our customers. We've also formed a fleet advisory committee consisting of a diverse board from a variety of departments with the aim to help with comprehensive decision-making, educate our users, resolve policy questions, and develop policies to govern future decisions. Next slide, please. Operations revenue. Revenues are pretty much status quo. One notable exception that I want to point out is there was a significant drop in pool vehicle usage, which is reflected in a decrease in revenue. The vehicles traveled 96,000 fewer miles, 4,459 fewer trips. And there's a drop in revenue under other, also due to the reduction of sold vehicles, corresponding with a reduction of vehicles replaced. Next slide, please. For the operations proposed expenditures, again, mostly status quo. Of note, in other projects, it shows a large decrease from 21, but this isn't an actual decrease in money spent. It's the result of funds that were earmarked to replace the failing Parks and Rec and Facilities generator. Instead of replacing it, we had the opportunity to consolidate the power needs for the Parks, Rec, and Facilities with the Public Works generator, which has the capacity to meet their emergency power needs. These funds were encumbered in FY21, but the project won't be completed until FY22. In addition, the transfers line item includes over $1 million that was in the vehicle replacement reserves that was transferred back to fire for the leasing of the 2 new fire rigs. Next slide, please. Our fleet replacement plan reflects a significant decrease in fleet replacement as a result of our COVID response and life cycle extensions. The replacement recommendation for 22 for fire replacement reflects the lease of 2 trucks instead of the purchase. And you may note that the 22 recommended budget that you're seeing on the screen here is less than in your budget document, and this is due to the fire rig lease that's currently in process. Next slide, please. We have some good news. In 21, we rolled the first of 4 hybrid patrol vehicles into service. And although preliminary, we are seeing a 63% savings in fuel economy. A couple of these vehicles were placed in service recently and thus have very few miles on them, making it difficult to forecast fuel savings trends. However, initial results look promising, and 6 more hybrids are currently in some stage of development. Projected fuel savings for the total hybrid fleet is $108,000 per year. Hybrids cost more than conventional vehicles. However, we expect a payback in less than 2 years. The savings increase as the cost of gas increases. This was all calculated at $3.75 per gallon. And as you know, the cost of fuel is actually more than that, trending higher at the moment. There are also environmental benefits as well. If the patrol vehicles were hybrids, if all the patrol vehicles were hybrids, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions would be 11,398 that would be saved. Next slide, please. Some more good news. 100 Best Fleets is a program that's been around for 25 years and recently partnered with NAFA, the National Association of Fleet Administrators. This is the premier national organization of fleets in the nation. And the City of Santa Barbara Fleet was recently recognized as the 5th top performing fleet in the country out of hundreds of fleets. We also had our technician that maintains fire apparatus for the city, Mike Wilkins. He was named as the 2nd best emergency vehicle technician in the country for Firehouse Magazine, by Firehouse Magazine. Again, this is no small accomplishment, something to be proud of. We place a great importance on staff development in fleet. ASE, the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence, is a national program that is designed to certify and elevate the technical expertise of technicians that was established in 1972. 100% of the City of Santa Barbara technicians are ASE certified. 2 have gone above and beyond and have actually achieved a level of world-class certification. Less than 1% of technicians nationwide have achieved this level of certification. As such, the City of Santa Barbara has been awarded the Blue Seal of Excellence from the Automotive Service Excellence Organization as a result of having so many technicians certified. This shows you the caliber of technician you have maintaining the City of Santa Barbara fleet, and it's something to be proud of. Next slide. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, if there are any. And if not, I'm happy to reintroduce Joshua Hagmark, Acting Public Works Director, to provide some additional comments.
Well,
Thank you,
Mr. Horwell, I'll let Mr. Hagmark take over, but I really do have to insert congratulations for the 5th top performing fleet in the nation. Kind of awesome. And then congratulations to Mr. Wilkins for his national recognition, and then all of your excellent technicians. It's always nice to see you too. I don't see you enough. It seems it's once a year during budget season. Okay, thank you, sir. I don't see any questions. Mr. Hagmark.
Mayor Murillo, council members, I'd be amiss not to mention this is Gary Horwell's last budget presentation.
No way.
Yeah, Mr. Horwell's will be retiring in July after 27 years of service to the city. Mr. Horwell's passion for managing fleet service shows in the prosperity of his staff. He'll continue to achieve a high level of professional recognition and in the good financial standing he's leaving the fleet division. On behalf of the city, thank you, Mr. Horwell, for your service, and we wish you all the best in a well-deserved retirement. So with that, if there's any questions we can answer about fleet services, we'd be happy to do so. And if there's no questions, we're happy to roll into our last presentation, which is on water resources.
Mr. Jordan has a comment.
Good comment. I just want to say thank you too. It's like we're kind of at this period in time where we start to see I don't really know any way which to say it without bothering somebody, but these mature standard bearers of the city that have done so much over the past, in your particular case, decades, leave and take all this corporate knowledge with them. And I know there's young kids coming up behind you, and I'm sure you're working well with them, but just thank you so much for the decades. It's the same thing. See you once a year in a budget presentation, but I know behind the scenes, you'll be missed. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. And thank you, Mayor Murillo, for your comments as well.
You're welcome. Ms. Gutierrez, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you for the service that you've given the city. And I was really excited when I read the recognition that your department got. And it definitely reflects your leadership. I know I'm fairly young and new to this position, but my father was a mechanic for many, many years. And so I understand the importance of keeping vehicles safe, and you and your department and your staff plays a very important role in our city. And like you mentioned, law enforcement, the firemen, they can't go to do their duties if those vehicles are not working properly. So thank you so much for all your work and dedication for the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez.
Okay, thank you. Hope to see you around downtown. Hope you're staying in town. So
I am. Thank you.
Moving on to Ms. Flessy then. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Harwell. And good morning, Mayor Murillo and City Council members. My name is Amanda Flessy. I'm the Acting Water Resources Manager. I am your last presenter today for the Public Works budget, and I'll be walking you through the FY22 Water Division's budget. Next slide, please. This is an organizational chart of our Water Resources Division. Water Resources is made up of three major categories: our water system, managed by Mr. Matt Ward; our water supply service and services managed by Miss Kathy Taylor; and our wastewater system, currently managed by our acting wastewater system by Mr. Thomas Welch. We have 130 extraordinary men and women managing and maintaining these critical services every single day. We are extremely proud to be able to be relied on day in and day out, and to provide excellent and transparent customer service and assistance to the community. Next slide, please. Our pandemic response. Both the water and wastewater teams have continued to show up every day throughout the pandemic to ensure that the community has safe drinking water, and to also protect the public health and environment from the community's wastewater. These individuals should be honored as heroes. Both operation teams followed strict protocols and safety measures to ensure the safety of the workers and the community during this time of uncertainty. The financial impacts during the response. We noticed a sharp decline in our commercial use, but that was offset by a modest increase by our residential use. So the overall consumption of water was only a slight decrease that we've seen so far. In addition to help with our finances, the delinquencies have been at the same levels as pre-pandemic years. So we really did not have a significant impact of delinquencies that other communities are facing. In FY21, we knew the community really needed us, so we made the decision to reduce our capital spending instead of cutting any services that we may offer. Since customer service was Water Resources' focus, we implemented some new programs to help our residences. With the Sewer Lateral Inspection Program, SLIP, we deferred any penalty fees associated with video or sewer lateral repair requirements. We also implemented a new video assistance program that will be able to help 3 to 4 times more customers than before the pandemic. We also suspended any water shutoffs for delinquent payments. Similar to many other programs, we switched to a more virtual customer assistant format for one-on-one meetings, or lunch and learns, or community engagement meetings. And lastly, we've been conducting weekly wastewater tests that monitors the COVID RNA strain in our wastewater. Next slide, please. This is an example of our weekly monitor test of the COVID RNA. The gray area is a 7-day average of COVID cases in the city, and the blue line is the weekly sample measurement in our wastewater. This is a trending tool that we share with Water Commission each month. These graphs are published with other meeting materials after each Water Commission meeting. We plan to continue to test the wastewater until at least the end of the calendar year. Next slide, please. The proposed wastewater operating budget for FY22 is $20.8 million, supporting 5 different programs, making it possible to deliver this critical service to protecting the public health and the environment is just 52 employees. That is a ratio of 1 employee to 1,800 residents. The work in this group includes overseeing wastewater programs and capital project planning, operating and maintaining 257 miles of collection mains and 7 lift stations, administrating the SLIP program, maintaining and operating the El Estero Water Resources Center, which treats 6 million gallons of wastewater daily and recovers approximately 60% of its energy from a renewable operations. And finally, the operations of the accredited water quality laboratory, which performs testing for both water and wastewater to ensure compliance with all federal and state regulations. Next slide, please. On this screen is a snapshot of our wastewater fund proposed FY22 budget and the adopted FY21 budget. The major difference from FY21 and FY22 are in the highlighted areas. On the revenue side, in the interest income, although the wastewater fund reserves are somewhat stable, the investment returns are lower due to the pandemic and interest rates. The service charge. This increase is largely driven by rate revenue. The rate revenue projected for FY22 is $24.8 million. This is the recommended target from the city's wastewater rate consultant. Although rates will only be increasing 5%, we have seen slightly higher levels in water use due to the dry conditions. On the expense side, supplies and services, the introduction of the video assistance program. This is a new program introduced by staff to assist customers with their video inspection of their laterals. Although this appears to be a new cost to the wastewater fund, it's actually being offset by the no longer offering the waivers of the sewer lateral repair permit fees. So really, this is a 0-0 impact to the overall budget. Special projects. There are fewer special projects or emergency maintenance projects at the El Estero Water Resource Center due to a lot of our capital improvement projects that have been going on for the past 10 years. Transfers. For both wastewater and water funds, the utility billing center upgrade and the website replacement projects were fully funded in FY22, and therefore funding is not necessary. As a result, the budget has been removed for the FY22. Next slide, please. The wastewater capital fund. The biggest discrepancy from FY21 to FY22 is the deferral of the Braemar lift station rehabilitation project. As part of the pandemic response impact, we reduced the pay-go funding for the Braemar lift station rehabilitation project. By doing this, we were able to stabilize reserves and be prepared for any revenue losses or account delinquencies. We are anticipating to return to full capital funding in FY22. I would like to point out that our pre-application for the state revolving fund for both the El Estero Water Resource Center electrical project and the Braemar lift station rehabilitation projects were approved in April of this year. This means that we will be submitting an application for funding for these 2 projects. We are hoping to get these applications and funding approved in the fourth quarter of FY22 and are currently shown in the last 2 rows of the graph. Also highlighted are the two new projects this year that have been added to the capital fund. The sanitary sewer overflow program is slightly reduced to support the new sanitary sewer capacity improvement program. Both of these programs go hand in hand and help reducing the sanitary sewer overflow events. Also new is the sea level rise adaptation program. This program supports additional planning efforts that are needed to further specify the actions necessary to adapt the wastewater system to the potential impacts of sea level rise. Next slide, please. The water operating program is made up of 10 different programs with an operating budget of $50 million. These programs are extremely diverse with the same goal of ensuring water supply for the future, to providing the highest quality of treatment for all of our water sources, effective monitoring around the city, and the distribution of safe drinking water to our community. The city's water system is a grade 5 level, which is the highest level of complexity of treatment and distribution system. We rely on 78 employees to manage this multifaceted system from cradle to grave. It is truly extraordinary how they are able to manage and maintain 3 different treatment plants, 300 miles of distribution pipelines, 17 different pressure zones, and 24 reservoirs and pump stations. Next slide, please. With the water fund, the biggest variances are in the revenues side. Similar to the wastewater fund, the water fund reserves are somewhat stable, but the interest returns are lower due to the pandemic. With grants, a $1 million grant was received for the desalination conveyance pipeline project, which is currently out to bid and is scheduled to be open in the beginning of June, has largely been funded by the settlement related to the Thomas Fire debris flow event. A second $1.5 million grant was received for the implementation of the AMI, or the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project. With the intergovernmental line, there are 2 new revenue sources being introduced in FY22. The water supply agreement with Montecito Water, which will go into effect on January 1st, and is provided an estimated $2.38 million in revenue. In the second half of FY22. The second revenue source is the recycled water agreement with La Cumbre Mutual Water Company, which will provide approximately $156,000 in funding annually. Service charges. Water sales are increasing by $2.73 million over FY21. Projections to reflect a planned rate revenue increase of 5%. Water demands are held flat in the rate model, so the revenue increases come solely from rate increases. Other revenues, another $10 million grant award for the reactivation for the desalination plant was budgeted for in FY21. The role of the desalination in the city's water supply portfolio is currently being studied as an element in the Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan and is proposed to be adopted in June. At that time, staff will decide if it's prudent to execute the grant, and it is proposed to be in the FY22 instead of FY21. Therefore, significant variance is appearing in the other revenues line item. Next slide, please. This slide shows proposed staffing changes that are scheduled to take place in FY22. Last year, we proposed staffing changes that concentrated on the customer service elements of water resources. Those elements include water conservation, water quality, and the sewer lateral inspection program. And this year, we will be implementing the water metering group in response to our advanced metering, our AMI project. All of these sections share a common thread of significant customer engagement. These changes are scheduled to take place in FY22, and although the staffing changes will have significant impact on how we do business, the overall impact to the FY22 budget is minimal. Next slide, please. The two items I wanted to highlight in the Water Capital Fund are the water metering program and the new sea level rise adaptation program. The water meter program, to elaborate on the previous slide, is AMI. AMI is in contract negotiation phase with the implementation anticipated to begin in FY22. As previously stated, we received a 1.5 million grant for this project. The project was put on hold during the drought, but customers continue to demand more information about their water usage and notification of leaks. Moving forward with this project will allow customers to better manage their water and utility bills. Also new is the commitment to the sea level rise plan. Similar to wastewater, water is also allocating money to start funding these studies and implementations needed to address this environmental need. Next slide, please. In addition to the fee increases that were mentioned earlier by our Public Works Director, an increase to water rates is also being proposed in FY22. We hired a rate consultant this year to take a look at the water's needs. What they derived was it was necessary that we have a 5% increase to absorb the inflation rates and to meet council policy of replacing 2% of the city's water mains annually. To date, we have conducted 7 public meeting hearings, and on June 15th, we are scheduled for the last public hearing to be presented at City Council. Next slide, please. I just briefly wanted to show how our proposed rates will compare to other surrounding agencies. Even with the proposed rates, our lowest users will still be below or right in line with the surrounding agencies. The high discretionary users, however, are charged at a higher rate. The structure of the rate is designed to charge highest cost of water to discretionary users and the lower cost of water to basic health and sanitation needs, which reflects the cost of service for these different uses. Next slide, please. This is a sample bill of all the rate increases being proposed in FY22 by water, wastewater, and solid waste. This will be presented and described in greater detail on June 15th. Just wanted to give you a little preview though. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentations, and I'm here to take any questions.
Madam Mayor, council members, that concludes the Public Works budget presentation, and we're happy to take any questions this time. And then we still have the general fund and Measure C presentation, which is about 10 to 15 minutes.
Mr. Casey, I'm wondering if we should take public comment. I don't see any questions at this point. Ms. Flessy, thanks so much for your presentation. Well, Mr. Gutierrez probably has a question. But maybe we should break it up if the folks that are waiting in the GoToWebinar audience are wanting to speak on this section of the presentation. But let's have Mr. Gutierrez go questions then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that really informative presentation. My question is just more for the public works involving State Street in particular. I was just wondering that there was conversations about having the 400 blocks shut down like the other blocks, and talks about converting Haley and Gutierrez to be two-way streets again. And I was just wondering if there's any plans for the upcoming budget to address that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, that is part of the plan coming up to look at that. I don't, Mr. Bailey is potentially on the line. We can talk a little bit about the process for that, but we were anticipating that would be part of the State Street Advisory's kind of process, the planning process that we'd be going through. Mr. Bailey, can you expand on that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez. Yes, in order to understand whether or not the rearranging of the two-way to one-way streets is feasible, it's going to take some more study. And we thought the best avenue for that is kind of in the context of the overall future of State Street.
Any ideas to a time frame as to when we would have a better understanding of whether or not it'll be possible?
Good question. You know, I think probably within the next 12 to 18 months would be reasonable. We are seeking a consultant right now to update the city's traffic model, which will provide us with some services to kind of give us a better understanding of what that would look like if that 400 block was closed off, and just how circulation would work in that area. So that effort's already started.
So as of now, it's definitely not going to be worked into the budget that's being proposed.
It is. That effort is already underway. So it is reflected in what you're looking at today.
The consultant part or the actual, you know, restructuring of the streets?
The consultant part. The answer that we get from the consultant will, you know, A, dictate whether or not it's feasible, but two, the extent of the public improvements that would be needed to make those kind of changes. My general sense is that the changes are likely going to be fairly low cost, with the exception of the Gutierrez-Chapala intersection. You know, if the overall concept is feasible, the Gutierrez-Chapala intersection is likely where we're going to see congestion unless changes are made, physical changes are made. So that's the most complicated intersection, and that's what's going to require more study. And right now, we just don't have a good answer of the extent of work that would be required at that intersection.
Do you happen to know how much it's going to cost for the hiring of this consultant?
Not off the top of my head, no, and we'd be happy to get that information to you.
Yeah, please, I'd really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, you're getting a consultant for a reason, but it kind of seems maybe that this is an issue or an idea that might not require one, just speaking off the top of my head. But yeah, please send me that information and I would share it with my colleagues.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gutierrez, you were saying you think that a consultant's analysis of the traffic circulation might not be needed? I didn't understand.
Yeah, well, to me, I don't understand why we bring in somebody who's, I mean, we have city staff that's been working here for decades. So we're going to hire somebody to come in over their knowledge and understanding of our community's traffic. It just seems.
I think just to kind of add some more detail to that, I'll just let Mr. Bailey do that.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Council Member. We certainly do have the capabilities in-house to do the study. What a consultant also brings to the table is some traffic modeling tools that we don't have in-house, and they can, these traffic modeling tools can give us answers on things that might not be readily apparent. You know, when we look down at that area of downtown, we can get a good sense of how we think traffic is going to go, but we really need a model that can go out a little bit farther than what we're capable of, just with our tools that we have in-house, just to make sure that we're getting it right. You know, I've got some ideas in my mind how I think this is likely going to go, but for something this permanent and this potentially impactful to the lower part of our downtown, it really does need to be looked at thoroughly with some tools that we just don't have available to us.
Thank you. I just trying to be conscious of how much money we're spending on consultants and such. We've already had conversations about it, and you know, it just makes me wonder. We shut down so many blocks of State Street, but we didn't hire necessarily a consultant to do that. maybe I'm wrong, maybe we did. I know we've hired consultants for the general concepts involving State Street, but not specifically to shut it down. We just kind of made an executive decision and made it happen, and it made adjustments as we went along. So yeah, thank you for the information. I look forward to whatever you can.
Well, I guess.
If I could add to that. I'm sorry, there's just a little bit more information. The city does have to, as part of its general plan implementation, hire a consultant to model the overall city. You know, we are, and this effort on the lower part of State Street is going to be a really small subset of that. So it's not a specific work effort that's going to be done just for that lower part of State Street. The timing happened to be right, though, that we were already going out to get a consultant to model the overall city, to look 15, 20 years into the future. But it just so happens that we can fold that effort into that. So I think this should be a fairly efficient effort.
Okay, well, I didn't realize we had made the decision to do that. I thought this was information that we were gathering to decide whether or not to close the 400 block. I know people want it, but that there were concerns related to emergency vehicles, and changing everything was kind of a big deal. I'm not arguing with you, Mr. Gutierrez. I'm just saying I'm glad for the information that would be coming out of the consultant's report and having a discussion about whether it's the right thing to do.
I don't think they stated that the shutting down of 400 block or the redirecting of traffic is for sure. Mr. Bailey just made clear that the consultant is going to be looking over the broader issue of State Street, but obviously the 400 block and redirecting of traffic, it's going to be something they're going to be looking into. Is that correct, Mr. Bailey?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Gutierrez, yes, that's correct.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on. So this is the opportunity to ask questions about everything that we've heard so far. Okay, I don't see Ms. Nedden, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No questions, but I'm just want to ask, at what point should we make comments? Is it per section, or if you just let us know when it's a good time?
Let's save our comments for after we hear public comment.
Okay.
Sounds good. So if there's no questions at this juncture, we'll go to public comment. Mr. Hegmark, if you'll stand by. And then we'll hear the Measure C section, ask questions, ask for public comment, and then we can make our closing remarks after that. Are you there, Ms. Gorman? Are folks raising their hand to speak?
Hi, Madam Mayor. We do have a couple people who have logged in. Nobody has raised their hand, so if you did wish to speak in public comment, please raise your hand in the app right now or send me a question in the app letting me know. Okay, we do have one hand raised, Robin Elander, and if the remaining people would like to speak, please raise your hand, or otherwise let me know. So we'll pull up our timer.
And we'll open public comment again after the Measure C presentation, so you're not going to miss out. We're happy to hear from you, Ms. Elander. Are we doing the 3 minutes? Okay.
Very good. And Robin Elander, go ahead.
Mayor, City Council, and staff, I want to thank you on behalf of the Downtown Organization of Santa Barbara for your support and collaboration and leadership over the past year. Together, we have been able to support our downtown business community get through severe challenges of the pandemic. We have proactively marketed and promoted businesses and leveraged resources of area partners to get businesses the resources they need. Your continued support will help us grow this past year's accomplishments and help our downtown business district bounce back and thrive into the future. I look forward to our continued partnership and working to collaboratively support the needs of our downtown business community and work to create a thriving, lively business center. I want to specifically thank all of the the team at Public Works for all of your work on the downtown State Street Promenade, continuing to look into the 400 block situation and the opportunity to close it per the business's requests, and all of the work with the ambassadors. It's all really significant, the partnership, and we just really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Thanks for sitting through the fleet and water discussion and everything else, Ms. Zealander. Anyone else raising their hands?
No, Madam Mayor, no other hands raised.
Okay, let's go to Measure C, and happy to hear everything that's going on in Public Works. So thanks.
So, Madam Mayor, if I have comments on Public Works, should I wait until after the Measure C? I'm happy to wait. I'm just trying.
I was thinking we could wrap up the budget
Okay.
comments at the end.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, Mr. Demore, was that you?
Yes, it is.
Thanks.
All right, well, good morning once again, Mayor Murillo and members of the City Council. This portion of the presentation will provide you a look at the entire proposed general fund and Measure C capital programs for fiscal year 2022. Many of the individual projects have been presented either earlier today or earlier this month by different general fund departments. The purpose this morning is not so much to highlight the individual projects as it is to provide a look at the general fund and Measure C capital programs in their entirety. Next slide. This slide provides a quick snapshot of the city's entire capital program budget by fund, comparing fiscal year 21 to what is proposed in fiscal year 22 and 23. Overall, the city's capital program is strong and has a diverse range of projects and revenue sources. Today, we are looking specifically at general fund and Measure C capital. Measure C continues to provide the majority of budgeted capital funding for the city's general fund operational areas. Moderate growth of Measure C revenue is projected in FY 22 and 23. Next slide. This table presents the proposed distribution of general fund and Measure C capital funds in fiscal year 22 to the various general fund program areas. So you can see there's 665,000 of general fund and about 23.7 Measure C. As in years past, the majority of funding is proposed to go toward the maintenance of city streets and street-related infrastructure. What is street-related infrastructure? This refers to sidewalks, bike lanes, traffic signals, drainage facilities, streetlights, sidewalk access ramps, curb and gutter. I think that captures almost everything. So in addition to maintaining the street surface, all of those other assets. In addition, significant investment is proposed to the maintenance of city facilities and to important capital upgrades to library and parks and rec facilities. Next slide. This table lists each of the 4 general fund capital projects proposed in fiscal year 2022. All of these were presented to the council by the respective departments earlier this month. Fire Chief Chris Males presented on the standards of coverage study and the automatic vehicle routing and recommendations projects. Library Director Jessica Cariente presented on the Central Library Automated Materials Handling System, and Parks and Rec Director Jill Zachary presented on the Eastside Neighborhood Park renovation. These 4 proposed projects total $665,000 from the general fund. Next slide, please. Next, I will provide an overview of the entire proposed Measure C capital program. As I mentioned earlier, moderate growth is projected in Measure C revenue, and it is anticipated to result in revenue reaching and exceeding pre-pandemic levels. The proposed projects reflect the priorities for expenditure of funds adopted by Council Resolution in February 2018 for the first 5 years of Measure C. The next series of slides provides a listing of the proposed Measure C capital projects by program area. Next slide. So starting with library, there are 2 projects proposed to be funded by Measure C. Both the workplace renovation project and the elevator projects were presented by Library Director Jessica Cadiente earlier this month. So I'm not going to get into any additional detail on those. Next slide, please. This slide lists the 3 Measure C funded capital improvement projects proposed in support of Parks and Recreation. The Dwight Murphy Field renovation and the Plaza Del Mar band shell renovation were presented by Parks and Rec earlier this month. The remaining project, the Urban Forest Management Plan implementation, is in support of ongoing street tree maintenance needs. Next slide. This slide lists the only proposed Measure C funded public safety project in FY22. It's for the ongoing development of the new police station, and funding is proposed in order to authorize additional phases of consultant work on this important project. Next slide. The next 3 slides list projects proposed to be funded in the area of city facilities. And as you heard earlier from our facilities manager, Angela Oslin, facilities supports work that's in other divisions in Public Works and also in other departments. And each of the projects that you'll see here, I'm not going to highlight any individual ones, but they were listed earlier this morning. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, facilities is located, as you know, they're in Public Works, and they provide capital project planning and management for the repair and maintenance of many city general fund facilities. There's a few more projects that are proposed listed here. Next slide. So these are the last 3 projects proposed for city facilities. In total, there are 10 projects proposed and almost $2.1 million. And this is approximately the level of funding that is required to keep up with the deferred maintenance backlog. Next slide, please. Thank you. The last group of projects are focused on streets and street-related infrastructure. I will mention a few of these. The Business Corridor Improvements Project is proposed to continue funding higher level repair and maintenance needs within our commercial corridors. And the Plaza de la Guerra Revitalization Project continues to move through the initial planning and design phase. State Street Promenade redesign was discussed in the community development budget presentation. And drainage was covered earlier this morning by Jim Dewey. Next slide. So again, we have here drainage improvements, sidewalk projects. These were highlighted earlier today by Mr. Dewey. And funding for both the Gutierrez storm drain improvements and the Laguna pump station repairs is city match required for a FEMA grant. These projects will improve stormwater capacity and reliability in the Laguna watershed. Next slide. These last 4 proposed Measure C projects are all in support of streets and street-related infrastructure. And we saw these listed earlier this morning. In total, the investment in streets is over $17 million. Next slide. This just takes us back to an earlier slide that we saw, which summarizes the proposed distribution of general fund and Measure C capital funds in fiscal year 2022 to various general fund program areas. This should give you a more complete picture of the general fund and Measure C capital programs. At the next budget meeting, scheduled for Wednesday, June 9th at 6 p.m., the council will receive final budget recommendations from Finance Committee, requests from City Council during department budget presentations, and staff will be asking council for final direction based on review of the recommended budget. So next slide. That takes us to the end. And I'm available, as are others, if there are any questions.
I like the photo you're ending on. Everyone loves road pavement. And I saw how much you've accomplished. So thanks for that. And Mr. Jordan, questions at this point?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What's actually so cool about that is the machine that goes before that rips up the old asphalt and conveyors it into a truck. So you get that machine, the truck's all queuing up in a net. So, you know, I might have a grandkid or two in the house that will walk a half a mile to go watch that machinery. So it's pretty fun to see our city crew working it. I just kind of have, I guess, a rhetorical question on both the police station and De La Guerra Plaza. When I keep seeing, I know the money's supposed to keep going to those, but when I hear phrases like ongoing consulting costs or whatever, are both of those projects on track as projected in terms of how we budgeted projected dollars for what's happening, or are we eating up more dollars through approval or design or outreach processes than we anticipated? There's kind of a never-ending pot there with Measure C, but that never-ending pot means if we're having challenges that we didn't expect, that means that money's being used for this and when it should have been used for somewhere else. So I'm just kind of curious as to what the status is on both of those.
Mayor Murillo, Councilmember Jordan, great question. And I would say on both of those projects, it isn't so much the cost that we've seen deviate. It's been more our optimistic project delivery timelines that we've had. The projects are taking a little bit longer than we had hoped, but we're not seeing a significant increase in project costs, and we're doing everything we can to control that. So I feel pretty good about that. And we have been making great progress on both of the projects. It's just, these are extremely high profile projects, and we want to get it right, and we're taking our time to make sure that we do that. So that's been the biggest surprise, or if we were to say something increased, it's been the time.
But not a correlation between longer time, more money so much. That's not really a concern yet.
I mean, it does cost more the longer time you're spending on a project, but in terms of the overall project cost, it's a pretty small percentage of increase.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other questions on the Measure C section? I don't think so, Mr. Demore. Let's see.
And
there's. Go ahead.
I just wanted to put in a plug for the video that we do have queued up. We could get back to it at some point if you're interested. I didn't want to forget.
Is that the one that Mr. Dewey was referring to?
Yes.
Let's play it and then we'll go to public comment. Thank you. I appreciate that. I had a note about it. Thanks.
I love it that this is my office. The whole city is my office. I love it.
Coming here to work is just amazing.
And all the guys they're pretty cool guys, you know.
The paving program is where the crew performs production paving work and deep lift repairs in the public right-of-way. They're performing a lot of different types of repairs. They do essentially what the contractors do when we perform our pavement maintenance program. There's a huge advantage to us to move from activities that are low-value activities that we can have contractors take care of for us and develop this crew that's able to perform full paving services for the city.
So with contractors, you get a higher cost per square foot. So right now our goal is to get the lowest cost per square foot possible. So if that means paving an extra road every day on top of the road we're paving, that's saving the city money, and that money you're saving is adding to more roads that could be paved. So that's what we're kind of looking for when we're paving, is where can we cut some costs to add another road in, to do more repairs, because that's ultimately what the residents are looking for, and that's what we're here to do. By maintaining the city's infrastructure, we prioritize a lot of the maintenance plans and the repairs by listening to the community and their concerns and what they want. Because if they're running through a pothole every day, that's a concern we need to be, fixing.
So a lot of times we have people that'll come out and they'll be like, "Oh, thank you very much for doing the job." They're very grateful.
They'll call and they'll ask questions about specific times we're going to be paving and stuff like that.
They share concerns with us that they may have, and we want to help them. So when they come and give us a concern that they're having on the street or around the corner, those are areas that we're able to address while we're there, because we're so customer oriented with the residents.
Throughout the year, we get a lot of safety training, and then here and there we'll get asphalt training as well.
All the training we do here is a lot of operator training, a lot of training how to use the different equipment we have. We got a new paver. We do a lot of training in that, how to use the grading, sloping on the paver. A lot of backhoe training, roller training, pretty much anything you can think of what a job consists of.
I started as a hourly. I moved up I got hired on full time, and now I'm the crew lead.
And I'm still in training right now. I'm still learning day by day how it goes, everything, situations.
Most of it's just been hands-on training, which is nice because I get to actually run the machine and learn how it works.
I started off as an hourly doing asphalt work, and then I got moved to the concrete crew, and I've worked there for a long time doing sidewalk removal and all that. After 6 years of working there, I became the senior maintenance worker. 3 years after that, I became the crew leader for the concrete crew. And I've been doing the crew leader for 20 years until this coordinator position opened up, and I went for that coordinator position.
If you're willing to show you're here to work and put in your effort, there's a lot of opportunities to advance here in the City Streets Department.
So whenever we advertise for new streets positions, we advertise locally. And most of our staff graduated from local Santa Barbara schools. And so we're always reaching out to the community, and we're not requiring people to have a lot of experience. I mean, experience is helpful, but we will train them to do this type of work.
I think it's important to hire locals because they're giving back to the community. People that are born and raised here like me, they see the city workers throughout the streets working, and they want to be one of them. I think it's also important because of emergencies, so they can respond quick. Just like in Montecito Mudslides, a few of the guys weren't able to make it up here because the freeway was shut down. And if you're local, they can call you and you can respond within half hour,
that's one of the good things about working here. Like, you're responsible, not just for yourself, but for everybody else.
I'm just incredibly proud of the program, but more importantly, I'm proud of the crew. I'm just so happy with our success, and it's all the result of the people that work for the Streets Division.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks so much for that. What a great note to end on, and what hard work that looks like. And it was nice to see the faces of the employees. So really appreciate the video, you all. Mr. Jordan, wait, oh, you have questions? Because we were going to
No,
see.
I don't, but I was just going to make a quick comment. Do you want me to wait?
Okay, yeah, please. Let's just see if I think there's 2 people that are in the audience. Raise your hand, please, if you have comments to make to the City Council on this budget, these budget items.
Madam Mayor, I don't see a raised hand or other indication that they wish to speak.
Okay, then this would be the time for us to make our closing remarks. Ms. Sneddon, you've been waiting, so go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is, I mean, just wow, Public Works. I mean, when they said at the beginning that it's like running a whole city into itself, it's really, I think it's really what people expect of their city government and where they want their tax dollars to go, and they get to see that every day. You really are true heroes. I can't say enough that the things that we take for granted, I think we only really notice when it's not working well, but there's so many things, and I just want to highlight a few. I've been through the presentations in engineering. Thank you to these crews that continue to work straight through the pandemic. It's incredible how much you're able to do in-house, and that the video you're showing, and the excellent paving work, and seeing, you know, when I drive by and I see this paving work and I see city trucks there, I'm just so proud of the work that you're doing, and you're know the city, you serve the city, and just so very thankful. And you have a lot to be so proud of there. In transportation, I'm really excited about the Las Positas and Modoc Road multi-use path. I think once this gets going and we can connect through different neighborhoods safely, I think we're all really excited about that. And also about the East Side, West Side Paseos projects, getting those connections going and completed. And a real thank you to working collaboratively with HLC and having each of those projects just be that much better. So I appreciate the inclusion that happened there in those discussions and going out on the street there. And then that was the first I saw the image for the buffered bike lane in the 101 underpass. I don't think we've seen an update on that, but I love it. I liked the steel work that showed in those images, and I'm not sure if that's approval exactly, but looking forward to that coming through. I think there's a lot of excitement around that and connecting through to the waterfront. Congratulations on just such strong showing in active transportation grants. The Olive Mill Roundabout is a great regional collaboration. I think there's a lot of excitement about that and improving safety. And just overall, thank you, Derek Bailey, for, you know, I think people don't always understand that what an important and technical job traffic engineering is. And it's just, you've done so exceptionally, especially this year with the challenges of COVID. And for downtown parking, thank you for formalizing the ambassador program. I really especially acknowledge the work that they do and the improvements that they brought downtown, and that just tremendous adjustment that the ambassadors made to dealing with COVID and issues of homelessness during this time, and really carrying through on job performances that the ambassadors may not have originally sort of signed up to do. And you've really risen to the challenge and are such a great asset to our city, and really want to see that program expand as much as possible. I'm really happy that downtown parking took over the maintenance and cleaning and janitorial services of downtown. I think we're getting a really great service there and efficiency. I'm really happy to hear that the hourlies were offered a higher back, and would still like to keep that increased presence. And I've already voiced this, but I really think in replacing kiosketiers, that function of those faces and those resources downtown are such an important part of further ambassadorship for downtown. And I whatever way we can to keep that going. I think that services being offered online now is a tremendous service to people, and it took COVID to get us there, but I think there's so many efficiencies and conveniences in that for the public. I think with so much online, the public really sort of expects to be able to fill out a form online, and just rising to that occasion. Very grateful for that. I'd really like to acknowledge Rob Dayton for his visionary work in responding to the pandemic with the opening of State Street and the responsiveness to the need for pedestrians and outdoor dining, and working with the parklets, and just the changing demands for bike lanes, and keeping that connection to downtown businesses going. Very appreciative for that work. For facilities, really thank you for, you want to talk about sort of frontline hero work, the janitorial services, and keeping everything clean and safe, and putting up the plexiglass and the everything needed to keep everyone safe is continuing to work. Really, really appreciative of that. And I'm sure that's going to just ramp up more as we're coming back in person, and just the added work that is, just acknowledging that. Fleet management, of course, working straight through the pandemic, and congratulations also to Mr. Harwell for that, joining that. And for my last comments for the Water Resources Division, thank you to Amanda Flessy for managing our water resources and just stepping in seamlessly into the role that you've done. And I think it's really easy for people to take for granted that when you turn on your tap, you've got clean, reliable, safe water to drink. And I think we also take for granted that when we flush our toilets, it's going to be effectively carried away. And the extra work you've done in the slip work and minimizing spills, and really above and beyond there. And the public outreach I've mentioned before is, I think, really should be a model for the city in the way that we do public outreach, and in the really focus on equity in that as well. And just as we're moving into the next 2-year budget cycle, for people to realize how much with the water mains that need replacing, and the sewer lines, and the coordination with the roads paving, and the major work effort of this last year of the enhanced urban water management plan, and keeping our city water supply reliable into the next drought and through the last 7-year drought, and the incredible work in securing funding. And just a last word to acknowledge Joshua Hagmark for his seamless transition into Public Works, acting Public Works Director, and really appreciate how knowledgeable and just proven in this role, in this smooth transition. And for Measure C funding, I just want to make a request, maybe that when we come back in our final deliberations, or maybe you could just send it to me or to us, the wording of the ballot measure of what voters voted on when they voted on Measure C. I'd like sort of a reminder of the expectation of what it is that voters wanted. I think that what was presented here was exactly in line with Measure C, but as Councilmember Jordan mentioned, that we might have changing needs, and I think it would be just a really helpful reminder for Measure C, but very, very careful and excellent managing of those funds. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Jordan? Are you coming back?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm getting to all the right buttons. Really, I just want to comment. Wait, okay, I'm getting to the right buttons. I keep hitting one and the other. How's that?
There you are.
Really, I just wanted to comment on that video. It's it's really an understated benefit in this city that we do a great job being humans to humans with our city workers. And unfortunately, we're on like about the 7th or 8th meeting where it's all the same, and you get to see a video like that and it kind of hits home. But that should be a recurring theme of gratitude, I think, to our staff. You know, particularly paving, I'll just give an example. When we're out oohing and ahhing at the machinery, somebody walks over and goes, hey, you're Jenna Jordan's dad, aren't you? And I go, oh, there's my claim to fame. That's who I am. But you know, they went to school together, or they knew Taylor. Or when the tree guys are up and down the street, they all know my neighbor Kenny, who was born and raised here and is still in the house that he lived in as a child. And you can extend that to wherever you go. The kiosks at all the parking places, the people on the counters, the people out in the street working with customers. We do such a great, you know, and the fire department has that down to a science. They won't roll by on the street a little kid waving without stopping the rig and giving out a sticker. So, but I just think it's often overlooked as to the level of service on a human level we do provide. It's certainly taken for granted, I think, and we should remember that basically we do. I hate saying do, right? But we do a great job at that, and it's all because of the men and women who work for the city and the way they come to work every day. So I just want to say, great video. I know it's not unique to this department or this group of people. It's prevalent throughout the city, but that was really a great indication, particularly the youth section on how we do cultivate people to stay here, get out of school, get a job with the city, and stick around and serve their community. Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have much more to add than my colleagues. I just sincerely want to thank all of our public works staff for all you do. I had a similar observation with that great video. I'm glad we had time to watch it. When it was said that when people come up and they talk, they're basically ambassadors for the city, and they tell them a project and they have that one-on-one connection. It was just really great to hear that from the staff that were part of the video, and just not just the work ethic, but the community aspect that goes into it. So I just wanted to appreciate that, and that comes from everyone on staff. So you're doing an excellent job. I want to thank both Mr. Hagmark and Mr. Demore. Both served as interim acting directors for Public Works. I think you both did a great job. And just so much here, when we talk about Public Works, that's the bread and butter of the city, and it's what people want us to focus on are these things. That's what local government does. It shows that on a daily basis, we're making lives better for the city when we focus on these types of issues of public works and infrastructure. And so just really want to thank all the staff for all your presentation. I could start naming others and getting into there, but then we'd be here for another half an hour. So you're doing just outstanding, and appreciate all that you did in this presentation today, especially during the challenging times of the last year. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a videographer, I have some notes about that video I'd like to share with you offline. It was really impressive. Good work. I love the drone footage. That was cool. I do actually have some questions that just sprang up about some of the sidewalks on the west side, and whether or not there's any plans, especially at the end of Gillespie Street where it butts up against Carrillo Hill. The residents there regularly reach out to me about when they can get sidewalks, because whenever it rains, it just becomes a mess. So I don't know if there's any plans to address that issue. And the other question I had was whether or not you all have a plan or what you have planned to deal with the Loma Alta aftermath and the general hillscape of that part of that neighborhood.
Thanks, Mr. Hagmark.
Mayor Rio, Councilmember Ross Gutierrez, we do have a meeting already scheduled tomorrow, an internal meeting with fire, community development, public works, even our creeks division. We're getting together to talk about the hillside. Of course, the majority of that burn was on private property, but how can we support obviously those private property owners and hopefully their insurance companies in getting those necessary repairs made so that that hillside is stable for this coming winter. We are fortunate this isn't October and we're having this happen and scrambling. We do have some time to do some planning, but as you've seen, that is a really steep hillside. So fortunately, it hasn't shown significant signs in the past of being, there's not a massive landslide area, but I think we do want to make sure that we've given it adequate attention. Bring in some soils experts to take a look at that. But we're going to do everything we can to support the private property owners on that, and hopefully we'll have a positive outcome.
Thank you. I also, if possible, if you can look at the hillside of where McKinley Elementary School is, because I know the residents there have had issues with water main breaks that have caused certain damage to the hillside, and they're worried that it's made it unstable.
Yeah, Councilmember Gutierrez, I'd love to know if there's ongoing there. We just completed a project there. We've spent well over $100,000 to stabilize that hillside after the water main broke. And so if there's some ongoing issues, I would love to hear from them, because I thought we've walked away from that feeling like a win-win for everyone there. We've got that, hopefully that hillside in better shape than it was before the water main break blew out. It sounds like Mr. Dewey here, we can speak to sidewalk work. Is that what you're on?
Yeah, Councilmember Gutierrez, to answer your question, just generally, there's two ways that we handle sidewalk infills. One of them is through grants through our active transportation program, but also we have a certain amount of money that we set aside in Measure C, one of the Measure C line items that's set up specifically for sidewalk infill. And Ms. Grant can expand on that if she wants to.
Thank you.
Yes, in addition to what Mr. Dewey mentioned with the smaller infill projects, as part, again, we have our fingers crossed if for those state surplus funds that might feed into the active transportation program. If we do get those fundings, then there would be a new sidewalk that would come in as part of the project on Euclid Avenue, Valerio Street, and then Pedregosa, Manitou are the major areas. But as Jim Dewey mentioned, that the smaller sidewalk infill projects are also on the radar for Measure C.
Okay, thank you for all that you do. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else with closing remarks? I would say that I accept your budget as presented. Thank you for making cuts and acknowledging how those would impact your operations and services to our residents. We're all doing our best in this cycle where our revenue sources have been severely impacted. And as Mr. D'Amour referred to, we're next convening on the budget at a special budget work session, Wednesday, June 9th at 6 p.m. So if there's nothing else, I will adjourn to the next city council meeting, which is in 2 weeks. And then the day after that is our budget hearing. So thank you and congratulations to all the good work by our Public Works Department and employees. Meeting adjourned.